Chapter 1 first introduces to the days before computers and online databases, when people had to use indexes. When computers were developed later, online databases became a great tool for librarians and researchers alike. However, with online databases, there are many building blocks that make up a database. Database building blocks. Databases are made up of fields and records. Think of fields and records like the rows, records, and one box, field, in an Excel spreadsheet. Another analogy is in the textbook is of a driver's license. A driver's license has a date of birth, height, eye color, and so forth. So each record represents a person. The fields represent the parts that are in your license, such as date of birth, height, eye color, and so forth. The diagram on the right shows the different database fields, like unique ID, article title, and journal name. All records are like rows in a spreadsheet and make up the database. This is a picture of a database EBSCO and the use of the subject index. This research shows the results of the subject search for coffee. So it shows coffee and language, coffee and oranges, and so forth. Chapter 2 gives an overview of the different tools a searcher can use. One of the most important tools is the Boolean search. And the first diagram shows AND. So if one were searching bananas and oranges, the results would show both bananas and oranges and narrows the search. If one were searching bananas or oranges, it would show a combination of both terms, which broadens the search. For not search, bananas, not oranges, would show results for bananas. This not excludes terms for the search. Controlled vocabulary is also known as a database's index, thesaurus, descriptors, or authority control. So what are the advantages of controlled vocabulary? Controlled vocabulary saves you from having to come up with and then search for every possible synonym or alternative spelling for a term. It will make the search more thorough and complete. It can be used to disambiguate words that have several meanings. For example, Mercury, a planet, a car, a god, or a metal, aiding in the precision of your search results. Field searching simply means the ability to restrict your search to a specific field. For example, to search just for the author field for a particular value, a name. Combining field searching with controlled vocabulary helps complete a thorough search. The picture below shows how one can use a combination of field searching within their research.
Chapter 4 introduces us to subject databases. A subject database is an organized, structured index of commercially published material. So why use a subject database rather than a general web search? A web search will only retrieve items people have made freely available on the web, which excludes a large portion of scholarly published materials. A subject database will provide an orderly scan of appropriate published materials within a specific subject. This will provide more relevant results than a web search. A thesaurus is a good tool to use when searching a subject database. This is a hierarchical guide to the subject headings of a database. You can see here a screenshot from the free version of the ERIC Thesaurus, which shows some of the portions of a subject record that might help you determine if it's the right term for your search. ERIC is the Education Resources Information Center. This is the premier database for education. The screenshots are from the ProQuest platform, which is provided through Wayne State. Listed here are some key features of the database, including basic and advanced searching, the ERIC thesaurus, limiters for narrowing results, and various ways to manage results. PsycInfo is the preeminent index to psychological literature produced by the American Psychological Association. This book talks about PsycInfo from Ovid, speaking of such key features as automatic mapping to the subject headings within the PsycInfo thesaurus, limiters for narrowing results, and customization of the results page. One unique feature of Ovid is the ability to build the search one concept at a time and then combine terms from the search history. This allows you to experiment with different term combinations to manipulate the results. Wayne State provides PsycInfo from EBSCOhost, so the screenshots are from the EBSCOhost platform. PubMed and Medline are primary resources for the scientific and medical communities. Both are products of the National Library of Medicine, and as you can see from the slide, Medline is the main component of PubMed. Medline contains over 8 million journal references in the life sciences, and it covers material from 1966 to the present. Some additional content in PubMed that is not presented in Medline includes newer material, older material, and non-life sciences content. Medical subject headings, or MESH, is essentially the language of the medical community. This is their controlled vocabulary, which all articles in the PubMed database are or will be indexed under. The MESH database is accessible through PubMed. Here is a screenshot of the PubMed results page, highlighting some key features and functions. One important thing to remember when searching PubMed is to put all Boolean operators in caps. Web of Science is a citation index, which means that each bibliographic record includes both a list of articles cited and a list of citing articles. This is a unique feature that allows you to easily track the relationships between research articles. This is part of the dual nature of Web of Science. The database contains article records that can be searched by subject, author, and other fields, as well as records representing each cited reference from individual articles. Web of Science contains over 10,000 of the highest impact journals and dates as far back as 1900, depending on the subscription package. This makes it one of the most powerful tools for academic research.
The focus on Chapter 9 is how people, the users and patrons who go to information professionals to gather research and find materials for that they are searching for. Understanding how people might benefit from databases and how they feel right doing research can help to inform us as information professionals on how to interact with them, formalize a reference interview strategy, and ultimately retrieve the best materials and information for their need. Bell outlines two pathways to better understand users, the theoretical background and the applied research background in information-seeking behavior. Theoretical background are theory pieces, articles, and pieces like Tyler's 1968 article on the 4 levels of questions within information-seeking behavior, those being the visceral, conscious, formalized, and compromised need. That outlines how people begin and progresses through their information-seeking journey. The visual need being the question before it is put into words, just a recognition that there is an information need, and they progress into the verbalization and the rewording, reformatting of that question in order to create the best method to find their information need. She also cites Kwan et al.'s research that studies the link between critical thinking skills and library anxiety, and Kuthal's model for the search process stages. We should all be familiar with Kuthal and the study of emotions and feelings throughout the information processes, which she also upheld in the 2004 article, which re-examined those stages. And there are also individuals like Dr. Janica Heinstrom who took Kuthal's model and factored in other influences such as disciplinary area, study habits, and personality within that information-seeking model to further explore the emotions and the information process that occur within different kinds of users. On the other side of that is the applied research on information-seeking behavior. These are typically observation studies and articles, things from academic settings, medical settings, and observations by both social media specialists and public librarians who contribute into the conversation on information-seeking behavior through their observations of users. When studying people and information behavior, it is important to look at how information seeking is affected by the internet age. Bell states it is typical for users to try to go through their interpersonal relationships, such as their friends or colleagues, or search the internet themselves first before they go to information professionals and the librarians with their questions. This typically has to do with time constraints, which do play a role. For when users are crunched for time, they're more likely to go to the internet for fast retrieval. It also helps to reduce the level of anxiety and embarrassment for asking these questions, going through the internet, which you can search yourself, and it can be between you and the Google page, rather than going through a stranger like a librarian with these questions. This tends to be especially true for medical questions, questions on sexuality, similar more personal questions like that. But it also opens up users to more information overload or a general problem with getting started because of the vast amount of information that is available. Bell also outlines how many of these internet searches are trial and error based, that puts in a sentence into your Google bar and changes a word or a phrase within that in order to yield different results, and continually doing this until they find resources that they need. Typically, this is done by scanning articles and titles for fast retrieval in order to find what they need, and they are absent of Boolean logic or advanced searches typically. Bell also states that because users typically go to the internet first, that the questions that come to information professionals and librarians tend to be more harder and complex, generally speaking, and this makes the reference interview so much more important. Knowing all of this information allows us to progress to the reference interview. Because other texts within this class discuss the reference interview in more detail, I won't spend too much time discussing it, but it's important to remember that the reference interview is essential to information retrieval, especially with patrons. The ultimate goal is to better understand the question or need and the literature on it, finding out what has already been investigated and found by the user, developing synonyms and an overall strategy to find the best material for the question. Active listening, empathy, and positive body language are essential to this in order to establish a comfortability and trust with the patron that is expressing the need. Of course, this also becomes more difficult over other pathways such as phone, email, chat services. It is also important to always invite back, keep open communication with those patrons in order to continue to have a relationship within the question, to read their body language, and to know when to stop giving information, knowing when the level of information that is already retrieved and is given to them is enough to satisfy the information need. Chapter 10 is about choosing the right resources for the right question. So when do you use databases and when do you use web searches? Knowing which source is best to find the right level of material for the information need is important. Knowing where to search and what pathway you should take is very important, and that's why the reference interview is always first and it is always key. It will help you get a better understanding on where to start and where to explore the question. Databases are more helpful when the need is based on authority and credibility. These are requests for articles, book questions, business questions, law questions, and medical questions. Web searches, however, are perfect for pop culture, local information, tracking down citations, rare or obscure questions, standard facts and statistics, and medical questions. It should be noted that book questions can be taken on a case-by-case basis, where obviously if the question is about whether a library has a certain material, the library OPAC would be the best database to use. If questions are about other books, WorldCat, if it is available, could be the best resource because subscription databases aren't trying to sell books and typically have less screen noise, as Bell states, than the other web pages. And if the question is about a textbook for like a high school or college, it can be better to use Amazon or Google searches, other web pages to find that information. Medical questions are also based in both camps because of this case-by-case basis. If the request is coming from a medical professional or a medical or nursing student, it would more likely be better to use a database resources to find the answer to these questions, while questions from laypersons on medical information, it may be more accurate or suitable to use a web search to find that information for them. Once it is established that a database is required for the information need, Bell offers 3 scenarios which affect the database selection process and to determine how and where to begin database searches when yourself or your institution has either many databases at hand, only a few databases at hand, or when there are no databases at hand for use. When database resources are plentiful, evaluation is necessary. Look at the subject coverage, the kinds of materials, magazines, scholarly articles, books, book chapters, things like that. The date coverage, the level of material, whether it's popular or research-based, the searchability of the databases, and whether or not if it provides full text, and whether full text is necessary to fulfill the information need. For a few examples of evaluation materials. It is also important to note that you can use multiple databases to answer your question, and it is perfectly okay to use web searches to gain background information on the topic so that database selection is easier. Knowing where your topic fits makes it easier to choose which source would be the best. With only a few databases at hand, you repeat the same evaluative processes for the first scenario. The same evaluation, multiple databases, in the same manner. In this case, it may even be easier to find a database because it's easier to familiarize yourself with a limited number of databases rather than a plentiful, almost unlimited amount of resources. When no databases are available, be sure to take advantage of free online databases. Often government agencies put their database content online for free. Google Scholar is also effective for article searching and has a lot more advanced searching possibilities than regular Google searching and web page searching. Some examples of these free online databases include archive.org, Biomed Central, Cytopia.org, Sightseer, the Lista, which is the Library and Information Science Technology web database, World Bank database, and many, many, many more. Here is just an example of archive.org's homepage, which is a free online database. Archive has e-prints in areas of physics, plus some of mathematics, computer science, quantitative biology, quantitative finance, and statistics that are available online for free for users. Chapter 11 elaborates on how we as information professionals should evaluate databases and on what criteria to evaluate them. Institutions don't change their subscriptions overnight, and they don't change their databases very often, so evaluation is essential to that process of change. Let's start with the initial information to gather and what to look at. Often databases are offered through different vendors, so shop around. Searchability and structure of the database can vary depending on which vendor is providing that database, and it could yield different searching experiences. Look at the existing reviews that may be out there for other customers and institutions. These are not to be used alone in determining whether or not to adopt a database, but are often a good place to start your own evaluation, to give you ideas of what to look for and what to evaluate. As for the database features themselves, evaluate the coverage. What is the scope of the databases? Is it multidisciplinary? And what level of material does it cover? What format are materials in? How are the graphs and tables reproduced? Is there a selection policy? For example, is it peer-reviewed only? How are they indexed? And what is the date or geographical coverage? So are they only within certain time frames or certain parts of the earth? Like, are they only westernized articles? Are they in other languages? The currency evaluation helps to show us how often materials are added, such as if a journal is published in print, how soon will it be available on the electronic database? What is the size? How many records does the database itself encompass? Are there any errors? Typical errors such as factual errors, typos, and indexing errors can be hard to test, but keep your eye out and spot as you are evaluating to see if there are any errors. Are there any database aids or help functions? And lastly, how much does it cost, and does it operate on a certain platform? Is the database only affected on Linux or iOS or Windows platforms, or does it not matter? These are all things you should keep in mind through the evaluation process. Vendors often offer trials of their database to help with the evaluation process. By downloading a trial, it is easier to evaluate and search each database to understand how it functions and how materials are represented within that database to make a more constructive evaluation to determine whether or not the database is appropriate for yourself or for the institution you work for. Be sure to only ask for trials if you are serious about the database, as to not take advantage of the vendors themselves. When you are testing and going in the trial phase of the database, look at how the records and file structures are set up and what fields are available to see if they are appropriate or useful to the overall database and subject matter. How many access points are there, and does the vendor supply their own if those do not work within the database? And how many ways can you look up a record? Searchability is an evaluation of the indexing and catalog of the database. Vendors provide documentation to show how they set up indexes and how many human interventions, cataloging, are applied to the records. So, are there stop words? Is there a controlled vocabulary or a thesaurus available? Can you adjust the date range? Does it offer limits to what you search? Can you browse subject terms to help find the correct subject term? And how many terms are there overall within the database? Are they bold or specific subject terms? Was there a mass search and replace for the old terms when those old terms are phased out with new ones? Does it offer abstracts? And if so, are they just the first paragraph of the article? Or are they long and detailed to get a better understanding of the article? And are supplemental titles offered to clarify the scope of the article? This becomes increasingly more important when articles are more funny or cute in nature, the titles, and so we can better understand them when we're searching for articles. Usability is an evaluation of the user interface, and this offers both objective and subjective evaluation. So it's like looking at whether or not it's simple or cluttered, or how the color contrast works to determine how you react and how you respond and how you believe your users will respond to the interface. The treatment of the research is very important when looking at multidimensional databases over single subject databases. It helps to look at what level of materials are provided, like the level of research materials, how many scholarly articles, and how are the scholarly articles identified as opposed to, say, newspaper articles or magazine articles. And do they indicate what percentage of the articles in the journals are scholarly sources? To continue with the more specific evaluative properties, it is also important to look at how records are sorted, displayed, and what the output capabilities are for each database. Specifically, looking at the level of control you have within the sorting, the display, and the output of the materials that you are searching for, and what formats are the outputs in once you recover the materials. When comparing databases with each other, compare the list of sources, journals, and document types that are available in each. Look for any overall overlap and any unique titles that are in each different source. Also look at how the search results are displayed in each and compare and contrast the scope in comparison with your evaluations earlier. It may also be relevant to look at the holdings of other peer institutions. For example, if you work for a university, looking at what databases other universities use and other resources that are at other universities may influence whether specific databases may be relevant to your own institution. And what is the ideal assessment of the coverage in relation to the subject matter? Or rather, what percentage of the overall literature of a subject is available within that database or those databases? This can be very hard to determine, but is a very thought-provoking question when evaluating databases and determining whether or not it is appropriate for your institution and whether or not it will meet the needs that you are seeing. Finally, once all the evaluation is complete and the trials are done, you can make a request to incorporate the new database within your own collection and within your institution. If you are within a larger institution, write a report, but make it concise and clear to support your observations. While you may have enough material to write a 15-page paper on the benefits of this database, it is better to keep it clear and concise in order to get your point across better. Be sure to include what the database offers to the institution and how it can be effective to who is using it. So how is it unique? How will it be used? How does it complement the existing collection? So how it fits in and stands out at the same time. So be clear on who you believe will benefit from the database and how it can be marketed to ensure a larger audience will use this new material, these new databases. And most importantly, how it can be funded. You can also include positive reviews and feedback as well, cited accurately in the appendix, and quotes from the main document in order to support your acquisition of the database. That is what Bell suggests. It helps to heighten your argument and to really bring home the evaluation and why you believe that these databases will help the institution overall.
The beginning of the chapter discusses the basics of teaching. So the first principle is to teach your audience. Use visuals, try interactive teaching. Principle 2, avoid lecturing. Avoid lecturing because people usually don't retain as much information as if one were to demonstrate or use interactive teaching. 3, wait for the answers. Let there be a pause to give a chance for people to answer your questions. 4, less is more. Sometimes you can teach too much information. Gauge your students and the information you are presenting. Database teaching opportunities. Teaching a patron how to use a database at the reference desk. Or have a literacy class teaching patrons how to use databases within a 15 to 20 minute session. Go step by step and try to have interactive teaching while teaching how to navigate and use an online database.